right. I'm Nathan Broderick. My company name is AI Vector. We're a AI software company, so we help businesses integrate their AI solutions into business. We teach them how to do that and teach them where AI is appropriate and where it won't work for their business.
My name is Dr. Lisa McKee, and I'm a professor at Bellevue University and teach graduate classes, including risk management. And I also have a security and privacy company called American Security and Privacy.
My name is Brandon Fetters. I'm a senior manager of R&D at Broadcom with their cloud security division, as well as a co-founder of a company with my wife, Apprise, where we focus on small businesses and helping businesses do anything from websites to AI and ML solutions.
Very good. All right. I'm going to be helping doing the moderation for this event. And so we're going to start off. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity. We're going to be talking about the risk assessment in these uncertain times. So we'll start off with what is risk assessment? So we'll just go down and have everyone talk about what their views on risk assessment is, and then we'll continue to the next questions.
Yeah, so risk assessment is assessing the organization collectively across not just systems and applications, but people, processes, and technologies, where there may be potential gaps either in security, privacy, or potential, even physical security. And how do we resolve those to make sure that our organizations stay up and service our customers?
Yeah, I think that really kind of hits it at a high level. I think it's important to understand what in your organization is risky, right? So understanding data you're collecting, whether it's software, hardware, data, devices, all of that type of stuff, understanding what that is so that you can then go about the process of what Dr. McKee discussed with regards to kind of that assessment piece.
Yeah, and I agree with Lisa and Brandon. I think risk assessment is that, as well as I look at it from a system standpoint, making sure that people don't get into my systems, and also that they don't steal data, and also that the company's protected long term from any bad actors or people from the outside. All right, so let's talk about there's a couple different types of risk assessment that you can make with the business. So we're going to talk about the first one, which is security risk assessment.
So security risk assessment, understanding your technologies and where software development, applications, processes, and what gaps might be present with them, even including like disaster recovery. So if a system or application goes down, how quickly are you able to respond? Or even ransomware, we were talking about that earlier with other things such as ransomware and encryption keys and storage of that. So that's on the security side. Brandon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it ties in as well with compliances of, a common topic that's come up this over the last few days is like your PCI, PI, HIPAA, just all of those data elements and making sure that you're also compliant with those.
Yeah, and for a security assessment from a system level, and it's making sure that that you have the proper controls in place. You do your regular patching. Can people gain access to the system from outside? Who has access to it? Who has access to VPN? Who has access to your controls? Who has access to the data, from every aspect. So we need to look at that from a risk assessment level. The next one that we'll cover here is privacy and what's privacy risk assessment.
My favorite topic. So privacy is specifically more looking at the data itself. So security systems and technologies where privacy is looking at the data. Who has access to the data? Where is the data going? Where is it shared? And especially looking at third parties and the risk that comes with that, and where that data is being stored even internationally. We talked about that earlier as a group of international privacy laws and risks that might come with cross-border data transfers.
Yeah, and with international becomes things that we aren't always thinking about, right? Because we have data centers in foreign countries and different places, and we're thinking, we have our data center with a U.S. company, maybe, but where are their data centers stored? And that might mean that we have to do more due diligence on our side to make sure that our data is safe, that we're following regulations, things of that nature.
Yeah, from my level, I look at it as even though I've got a company that I use like Amazon or I have my own data centers, that it's that risk of, can I keep the user's data private? And even though it's up on Amazon and it's in their systems, who has access to that? And that's definitely, just because it's out there on Amazon doesn't mean you're safe. Just because it's in your cloud or your systems, definitely can be scary because, yeah.
And another aspect with that, when you talk about that, is even like data retention, right? Not just where is it stored, but how long is it stored out there, and what's that retention process look like to identify that information that's met its retention policy, and then to securely remove that information, not just from systems and applications that are online, but also from backups.
And one thing that can happen as well is we've captured, okay, we've limited our access to a certain number of people, and we're capturing the fact that they're accessing it, but then we never actually go look at who's actually accessing that data. Is there someone that's accessing the data that we actually don't think they should have access, whether that's intentional on our part, and we just didn't add them, and there's something internal, or did we actually have somebody who got into our system that's accessing it on a new account that was created without us having any visibility? So it's important not only to limit that access, log that access, but then also go look at those logs and do some verification to make sure that only those people are actually accessing your systems.
And there's a good point about that, because when we talk about security and privacy and some of the differences between them, with security, it's that unauthorized access, right? And we talk about who breached a system most often is what we're looking at. When it comes to privacy, privacy is even accidental disclosure. So if I were to send, a list of all the participants that are here at this conference to, either one of these gentlemen, that could be seen as a privacy incident because they weren't supposed to get that information. So it's not always just unintentional, but it could be accidental. And depending on the laws and regs, it may be required to disclose that. And that should also be part of your risk assessment of when you talk about access controls.
Yeah, and I mean, on the lines of that, I totally agree. It's pretty scary thinking, made aware of some extra laws and things coming up with privacy. That's going to be a lot more stringent and tight in terms of that. And you really need to start paying attention to who has, who can gain access to it. What are you sending out? If you're sending names out, you need to be extremely careful. So there's going to have to be a lot more from a smaller to medium-sized business corporation. You need to worry about this stuff now. And so there might have to be additional trainings or items added to it to show that, hey, I'm taking care of it. And that's an extra cost for business to be able to do that. It's also making people aware. That can cost some money for small business. A lot of them don't even have the time to research the laws out there, let alone that. But yeah.
And that's a good conversation point too, is that we've talked about the difference between compliance and checking the box and making sure that you have controls, and only from a compliance perspective. So we talked about SOC 2 and PCI earlier, versus having a holistic security, privacy, risk management program with security and privacy controls to protect all of that, will help with some of those changes in regulations. Because if you have a more holistic program, then you're not just chasing all the regulations and the changes that might be coming down from that. Usually those programs will help catch some of that.
Yeah, and you're actually speaking about this earlier as well. There's a lot of different regulations from, we have a bunch of different states that have their own regulations now. There's international stuff, and that's changing all the time. So quite frankly, even being in the field, it's very difficult to keep up with all of those changes. And not only the changes, but okay, here's a change that's been posted. What does that really mean? What does that mean for my business and what I need to do to protect my data, to protect my customers, my employees? And sometimes that takes some time to work through. And so there's time and effort and resources that need to go into that, and ultimately money, which isn't always the top of our minds when we're trying to run our day-to-day business.
Because that is, in essence, a risk in and of itself. If you don't know the laws and regs and standards that apply to your organization, then you can't have the appropriate controls in place. You can't monitor for them. And so then, therefore, you can't ensure that you're doing the necessary things to be compliant with those laws.
That's a,
So for a space like FedEx, of course, we have cyber everything, but still vulnerable, of course. But for small, medium, micro businesses, this is the toughest conversation. They understand the importance completely, but these regs, California especially, that's a bubble, right? They have their own planet. And then just all these other regs that are there. Are there plans to help facilitate communicating and allowing small, medium businesses to adhere or to better protect themselves than right now? So right now, if you try to consult with or advise a company, it's very different. They're depending on ISPs for security. They're depending on the applications for security. And in terms of how those applications for GDPR, of course, there was a big mandate for all applications to do it. But that's not the same in terms of how they're going to adhere to security for all security breaches and risks. So are there plans to help small, medium businesses better prepare themselves and better equip themselves to better learn the cyberspace so that they can protect themselves?
That's a great question. So the question is, are there plans for small, medium-sized businesses to help manage all the regulations and manage keeping on top of this so that it's not as burdensome? Actually, just this week, the White House, or maybe it was last week, the White House came out with an initiative where they are going to start looking at some of that and streamlining that. I entirely agree with you, and we were talking about this earlier, in that there are so many laws and regs that organizations are almost crippled by it, right? There's so much to do, and then they conflict with each other, that then I do nothing because it's too hard to do everything. But, so you're in that catch-22, and completely agree. It's not easy for small and medium-sized businesses. And you do then tend to outsource a lot of that and put reliance on other third parties. But then there's risk in that too, because do those third parties know? Do they truly know the landscape of your organization? Unfortunately, there's not really an easy answer for that. What I tend to lean towards is having more a holistic security and privacy framework that's implemented across the entire organization. And if that then includes, in most cases, you can catch 80 to 90% of all those laws and regs, and then you're not chasing laws. But do you have an opinion?
Yeah, no, I think it's a challenge, right? And it's
Yeah.
going to be a process, and we're going to make baby steps, and there's probably going to be some times where that's missed or we take a step back. But I think my advice would be, the first thing is just awareness within your organization. So I made the comment earlier about, okay, we're logging people who have access to our data, but we never look at that log, right? Because okay, great, we checked that box, and we're good there, and now we're going on and doing our stuff. And so I think one way to help with that, even within an organization, without having to understand the ins and outs of the risk or the breaches and things of that nature, is just to be aware of what data do I have, who has access to that data, and really trying to limit some of that stuff as much as possible and go take a look at it, right? And while it doesn't directly address your question and the issue, I feel like it takes us one step closer to just, as a small business owner or a medium business owner, having that awareness of, something weird may be going on here, and I really do need to reach out and go get some help and maybe pay that money that I wasn't willing to do up front without, where nothing had happened.
And what you're talking about is data minimization, right? If
Yeah.
you don't have it, they're not going to come get it because they can't get what you don't have.
from a small to medium business perspective, a lot of this is frustrating for us. So we look at a lot of these laws come in, and we don't have the resources lots of times to take care of it. There is no money there for taking the CEO out for 2 weeks to be able to go and figure out, some of this stuff. It's not realistic at all. So we were as we were having that discussion, personally, I would like to see, or I'd like the laws to open up where if you're getting attacked, you can retaliate back, and you can actually get on the other person's servers and shut them down. I know that sounds kind of strange, and some people like it, some won't, but I think it would be nice to be able to have some form of, yes, I'm getting attacked, I need to be able to push back, or have some more controls in place to allow you to be able to function during those times. I've I've seen companies get attacked, and there's nothing worse than waking up in the morning with a ransomware banner that says you've been hacked and pay this amount by 6 hours, or it's going to double. So those types of things are really scary. There are other. If they're going to do forced regulations, I'd like some things to come out that are trainings for this that are free, or tools that are free to be able to take care of that. That would actually be okay, and then you could work with it better. That still doesn't solve the problem of you don't have enough staff to work through it. That's a whole nother issue, and that's something that would also have to be addressed. Is did you do enough to take care of the problem? Would be a checklist thing, and say, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are great, amazing points, except we don't want to.
We kind of do.
No retaliation, that's what I heard.
just be careful what you ask for. Yeah, the type of attack.
I realize that's not a popular opinion right there.
The
I
teenager in the
wouldn't do it.
basement versus a state-based attack might have a different response. But
Yeah.
Popular, but I think the frustration, I think a lot of people would agree
Yeah.
with you that they would want to do that.
Yeah.
But, and I bring that up because this is security is so very important. And when you deal with small and medium businesses, I think people fail to realize that with some small and medium businesses, actually close to over 70% in California alone, California is a state that's really run on the back of small and medium businesses.
Oh yeah.
Most people just think it's the large companies, but it's not. Small and medium businesses, the one owner is serving the purpose of different roles. So for them to stop and they understand they need this cyber, they need the security, but they just don't have.
Yeah.
It's a special breed to even deal with. You gotta think.
Yeah.
Most
They
people
already know
don't.
marketing,
Yeah.
They don't know sales. They just know the product. It's
Yeah.
a dream. And then for this, so it would be great to maybe see regulations that require these applications that they're using in some way to be heavily, heavily secure, to protect them in some way, because the education is going to get there. And even if you gave me a video, they probably don't have time. You probably don't have time to retaliate.
I don't, and I wouldn't,
Yeah.
So, but I do have time to hire my staff to be able to take care of the servers and patch and do the bare minimum and learn about that. I do have time for that.
Yeah.
And yes, and absolutely, that is something that we do. We use AI to help assist us. Like, I don't have enough to cover all 4,000 servers we're watching right there. We use AI for that. We use monitoring tools to watch it. We use AI to watch the servers, watch for differences, and it's fantastic for watching the security side. It catches that, but
Well,
yeah.
and I think maybe the dirty little secret as well is big companies aren't good at it either. And one of the trade-offs or one of the decisions at big companies sometimes is it's still going to cost less for them to pay for the penalties for some of the stuff, especially with some of the lawyers and kind of getting some of those fines down, than for them to invest everything to cover all their bases as far as security goes as well. The analogy I tend to use, whether personal or even in small businesses, is we think of a house, right, and house security. If I have my house and I leave the door open all the time, not going to be secure at all, right? So first thing, let me close the door. Then let me lock the door. Then let me, maybe put a fence up and let me get an alarm system. And so for every layer that you add on, what it makes you do is you're less of a target, ultimately, because there's enough people out there that are easy targets that a lot of the attacks are focused on where can I go do this quick, get in and out, not get caught, and maybe that means I'm getting smaller amounts of money, smaller information on things, but that easy win is a positive for most attackers. And so just each level you can get, it's not the be all and end all, but it at least helps you make you a little bit less of a target. It's similar with just the data that you're storing, kind of going back to if you don't have the data, you're not as much of a target. It's you don't have anything of value that's worth going and attacking. Easier said than done, but.
And what you're talking about there really is defense in depth, right? So the more layers that you have, even if you get through the first layer What's the likelihood of getting through the second layer and through the third layer and, down? And even if you get through the first one, right, you might catch it at the first or second layer so that it doesn't perpetrate down further. And so that then is a risk tactic and mitigation strategy. The other thing that I heard, Wiley, that you said too, is when we deal with small and medium-sized businesses is that you're absolutely right in that a lot of times people have many roles in those organizations because they don't have big staff. We've also know that even in medium and large businesses, people get promoted into positions that they may not be qualified to even do because somebody left or this is a new job and we just need somebody to fill it. And so going back to the training and awareness aspect of not just putting people in roles, but do you have the right people in the right positions doing the right job? And if not, what does that look like to solve that? Do they need training? Do you need to hire another resource? Because that's also going down to risk. If you don't have the right people and you don't know what you're doing, you can't protect the organization and the data that you have and your customers.
Yeah, all right. Awesome. The next one is, what methodologies do you guys use for risk assessment?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's many different methodologies out there, ISO, NIST. I actually created a privacy risk methodology that's out there as well, that's been published. ANSI has one, so there's many different ones. My biggest recommendation is NIST and ISO specifically have complementary security and privacy frameworks that include risk. So when you find that methodology that you're looking to implement, find those complementary ones so that you're solving it from both sides. What do you use?
Yeah, kind of referencing those, really what we end up doing on my side is on the cloud side, we're looking at kind of attack vectors and identifying those attacks and being able to stop them at the time they're occurring. And so it's a little bit more internal, our methodology, but it's not all that different from, like you said, there's a bunch out there, but like NIST and.
Yeah, I mostly use right now a compliance-based, so it's a checkbox list of, do I have this secured, do I have this secured, am I patching, am I doing backups? So we're moving towards a better system is what we're doing right now, and we're revising, systems in the company. There are CRM tools out there that we've been reviewing and that sort of thing. But it's becoming more and more important that as we've been transitioning from small to medium, there's lots of these questions that, you don't think about when you're a small company. You would, have never thought about needing more people to do this stuff, and you don't think about that till you've got a certain size of staff. And now that we're larger and that sort of thing, and we're growing real fast, it's neat seeing that we need to do that. So I'm not quite as large as Broadcom. We'll get there, but we're excited to see the growth. We're excited to see new tech come out for these strategies, and maybe we'll just train our AI bot to take care of it, so it can implement these strategies in place. Why not?
So where does risk sit in your organization? Are you responsible for that on the security side?
Right now, I hire a person for doing the risk management.
So is
we've
that an
got somebody
internal
in there.
employee or external?
He's an internal one.
Internal.
Yeah. So what we don't, where we're growing out right now, we do internal, but we do, we're setting up some software and trying to bring that in place to be able to at least have that external looking, external view of it. But we also work with, different large organizations who also review our stuff. So we're constantly getting spreadsheets, and I'm talking, 40 pages of material you have to fill out. You're doing this. Where's your data located? We have to maintain the diagrams and all that no fun stuff to do. I'm glad somebody else is doing that, but me. That's how we handle it. They're massive checklists of somebody else is already analyzing our organization. They're already doing the risk assessments. And most of the time, I just implement that with our own staff. I'm like, do this, take care of this. This is what this large company wants. So we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, because there's different models for that too, right? So it could sit in within security. It could sit in the risk office as well, under the CRO. So there's not really a specific place as to where you have to put security and privacy risk. Privacy might even fall under legal or under a privacy office. So there are different models, but the biggest thing is that making sure that it's accounted for somewhere and that somebody has that responsibility. And that when you're looking at security and privacy risk, it actually rolls up into the enterprise risk management framework and role, because those are different. Enterprise risk management, looking at things like privacy and other things, not just security and privacy. And not always do people understand the differences between them. What about at your organization?
Yeah, so at Broadcom, it's a very large organization, so we've definitely got a bunch of people that are focused on those areas. And then on my own company, Apprise, it's my wife and I kind of tag team that and cover as much as we can. But often we don't kind of take our own advice of, we don't end up capturing any information ourselves. We try and limit that as much as possible and support the companies that we work with within their environments and systems, and help kind of mentor and educate them as we go along.
Question?
Yeah, in all organizations, regardless of size, one of the things I've heard from you is that security is everybody's business. How do you go about making sure that everybody's included?
So the question is that security is everyone's business, so how do we make sure that everybody's informed and aware? Somebody want to take that?
I'll start, yeah. Even from our company, I make sure that everyone, one, has phishing training, I think is way important. There's free sites out there for doing that. There's also the pay stuff. I found anything works better than nothing. We have some phishing training software that we use internally, so we can spoof the emails, make it look like it comes from FBI.gov and other fun places, or put fake links in there and see who clicks on it, So those are some really useful skills. And also, part of it is just when we're talking with people and doing that, it's not just the trainings that we give. It's also talking with them and say, hey, did you do this? And did you lock it down? I pay attention to my security experts in the company who talk to me, and they're like, hey, somebody's logging in at 11 o'clock at night, Why are they doing that, and who was it? And, so we do a lot of watching of the systems as well to make sure we know what's going on. And then we educate that person as well. As from an individual basis, we don't have to be as formal as doing some things, but we still do formal trainings and things like that to help them.
So some other things that I've done is posters around the organization, reminders, because the more you see it, they say that typically 5 to 7 times is what somebody needs to be heard or see before the information really starts to sink in. So having those reminders around the office. And October is Security Awareness Month. January 28th is International Data Privacy Day. So I like to do special events around those and just bring everybody together and, give them treats or something and just help them be aware of these things that are important to us in a fun way. Because the annual awareness training, I don't know about you all, but let's be real. You're like, okay, click the box, click the box, I'm done. It's the same one that you've done the last 5 years. And then people get bored with it. And then it's not effective. So that's another tactic too, is how do we switch up the training so that we're not giving the same training to the same people year after year after year to where they're just clicking through. They're not really learning anything, and then it's not effective.
Yeah. Well, and I think the phishing campaigns, in particular, I've seen as useful in the way that when I'm watching a training video, I'm not going to get caught by that stuff. I know better. And then the phishing campaigns can actually catch you. So that's one way I've definitely seen experience myself, and people going, oh, wait a minute, okay, I was humbled a little bit. Let me actually maybe pay a little bit more attention to this.
We built some good ones too.
Yeah. There's some pretty. It can be pretty effective at times, even for people that know better, right? Or the timing of when it gets you. You have a call from home, and you're going through email, or you're doing it on your phone, right? So that one I find effective in that way. The other thing I would say is there's a lot of these good ideas, but if the company itself, and especially the leadership within the company, hasn't also owned that and taken it on and talks about it and lives it, then it ends up being this is my one time a year, I've got to click through these slides to get through my training and we're done, and then I can kind of forget about it. So I think that's the other important aspect here, as well as a lot of things within our businesses, where if it's something that's important to us, we need to be able to show our employees and our organization that it is important at the highest levels, so that that behavior then also can filter down. And we're leading by example, not just, that one time a year where, okay, get your training done so you don't get in trouble, and then move on.
And you're talking about culture, right?
Yeah,
A secure,
exactly.
a security-aware culture, a privacy-aware culture, where it comes from the top down. And I like this top-down, bottom-up, let's meet in the middle approach, because it really takes all hands on deck to understand the risks that we have in our organization, because the frontline people are going to be the ones that are going to find this is what's really broken and this is what's not working. They're going to trickle that up to the middle management, and you need that support from the top down to say, yeah, I agree, let's go fix it and let's tackle some of these problems. Because if you don't have that, then the front line is going to keep raising the same issues that never get resolved, and then now we've got ransomware and other things that happen.
Yeah. So that brings up a really good segue into the next question, which is, what are the basics you guys do for risk management? What are the basic tools, and what are the basics that you do for it? So, yeah.
Yeah, so after you conduct your risk assessment, understanding the landscape of that. So prioritizing your risk, giving criticalities. Is it small, medium, large? Is it, there's different scales, 1 through 5. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. But how do you prioritize that? Because you can't fix everything all at once. And some things are going to take a larger effort than others. Some are going to be more expensive. Some are going to take technologies. So prioritizing those based on criticality, creating a risk management plan that then has owners assigned to it, timelines, solutions for that, so that way you have a plan of attack to address that. It's not just, okay, we know this risk is out there and we're just not going to do anything, because it's not going to, if you take that approach, it's not going to help the organization.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. It's the prioritization, criticality, and then ownership is the big one, right? Because if something comes up, if you don't have an owner, then it's likely to kind of sit around. So you need somebody to own that and be driving forward whatever whatever you're working on at that point in time.
Yeah, and what we've identified was there was no owner for some of it. So what did we do? We built an AI. There were certain small things where we were saying, who's taking care of regular patching? At the time, we had one guy doing it with too many servers to manage. So we started taking care of that. In that way. Also backups, who's taking care of it? When are we getting backed up? Where's our errors? So we started identifying those issues, and again, implemented some AI to help us manage that. So AI is a great tool, I think, for a lot of that, giving it the capability of, 2 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, can you back this up, or you can send a scheduled text to it and back it up,
But for those companies that haven't embraced AI, I know we've heard a lot about it these last couple of days. There's a lot of organizations that haven't embraced it yet, and that's okay. AI is still something that a lot of organizations are trying to learn and understand, figure out what's the implications. That's another risk, right,
Yeah.
to an organization, is what does that look like? And so even if you don't have AI, right, it could just be an automated job that goes out and says, okay, look at my risk register and which ones don't have owners. Or maybe that's an individual that's going out there periodically and looking at the risks that have been logged in your risk register, or which ones don't have owners, or even, due dates, right? We talk about owners and having a plan, but which ones are past due, or which ones are over budget, or, what does that look like, so that it's not just going into this black hole and on this list that nobody's managing.
Yeah, and so we could even broaden it maybe to automation, right? Of those alerts that we set up. Nathan, you given an example earlier about someone logging on at 11 p.m. at night, right? And so alerts, whether they're time-based or a bunch of different scenarios, and those are automated alerts that someone's not actively having to look at all of that traffic, but something happened that we think is important enough now for a person to look at. So you're filtering down all of that information so that when the person goes and looks at it, that's a valuable use of their time. They're not just, you're not paying somebody to sit there and look through a bunch of random stuff all day. And then the AI ML piece can just build right on top of that.
Yeah, if you don't have the tools, if you can't afford them and don't have the tools, start with something is what I always say. Something is better than nothing. Go grab a spreadsheet, mark down the things that are risk to your organization and write them down, and then prioritize them like you guys are saying. I would say that's key to just getting something started. And then later on, when you find out you don't have enough time to do those things, yeah, that's usually when you end up buying these expensive tools.
Yeah, and I think the other advantage to that approach is that you do then get that understanding. So you're forced to have an understanding then of the things that are happening within your organization, within your network, that you care about, that you're seeing, so that when you get maybe the more complex tools that, okay, I don't understand exactly how this AI model works, but I do know that I've found, again, if we just use the login time, I found that there's these logins that are late in the evening, or if I have a login late in the evening, my people aren't working then, that's very strange. And so when you see an AI model that's doing essentially the same thing, but it's maybe built for a more complex organization that has offices around the world, so the login times aren't always consistent, so it's doing it in a more complex manner, you still understand the basics of what's happening there. And so you don't have to be able to implement it yourself, but you can make that transition from the simple solution to the more complex solution, and it will really help you implement that and leverage those tools to your advantage, because each one of these is really just a tool in your toolbox to use.
So Nathan, one of the things that you talked about is just start somewhere. And earlier when we were talking about this, it's how do you get started, or what are some of the foundations of a good risk management program? So making sure that you have policies and procedures, a governance over it. It's not just going out and doing a risk assessment, but what's the frequency of that risk assessment? What's the scope of that risk assessment? Who's responsible for that should all be within your governance documents, your policies, and your procedures. And you're absolutely right, whether that's through spreadsheets or an automated system that keeps track of that. But it's really important that all of those go together collectively to make that program.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, let's get into the another question right here. This was a fascinating one for me. I'm a national company, and they've worked internationally through that. So I wanted to ask, what's the international issue? What are the international issues for risk management? Yeah.
Go first.
Yeah, I mean, I can give maybe an example from my past where I was working at a previous company where we built software for airlines that airlines used for maintaining their fleet. So supply, financial stuff. But we had to be ITAR compliant because we had international customers, and ITAR and some of the airplane parts fell under military laws. And so, like, it wasn't this, but it's the same as if we were, like, shipping missiles, or we had information about, like, missiles in our system. And so we were a US-based company, but we're contracted with international airlines, and we had to be ITAR compliant, not because we had information ourselves that was sensitive, but because our software was being used by airlines, and it fell into this kind of military gray area. So, and mentioned earlier just the data center side as well, right? And knowing where your data centers are important, because there can be consequences and ramifications in the future if those data centers might be located in areas that aren't friendly to your country, whether that's the U.S. or other countries.
Yeah, so when we talk about security and privacy on an international perspective, there's 85% of the countries in the world have some sort of privacy laws. There's also countries that have very specific data security, cybersecurity laws as well, so China and Russia and India. And when we look at that and understand the whole footprint of what your compliance obligations are, making sure that you're looking at that from a global perspective if you are a global organization, because it's not just what's going on here within the States, but it's all around the world, because all of those apply. And understanding then what those nuances are in those laws. So India, China, Russia, a lot of them have written right into their laws where they can come into your organization and say, I want to see all the information you have on our citizens. So if that information isn't segmented out from your US or other regions, now then you've got risk where they can see information into other areas of your business that maybe they shouldn't, maybe that information isn't there, but because it's not segmented, then it opens that up. And I actually worked for an organization that did have a presence in China when China cybersecurity law came out in 2018, and we did a risk assessment on that and evaluated the risk of not having accurate segmentation and what's the cost that it would have taken to get that in place versus the revenue that was generated from the business there, and determined that it wasn't worth the risk because we weren't right, wasn't a huge significant impact to our business, and we ended up shutting that down. So understanding that and what that could mean, and then understanding too, now we have all the wars that are going on, right? Unfortunately. So where are organizations located geographically around the world? Is it a secure place? Going out to the Department of Homeland Security website and looking at those travel bulletins that they publish all the time, because that's constantly changing. And when the Ukraine and Russia war started, the organization I was working for at the time, we did business with companies that were in Ukraine that now we can't do business with, and had to figure out what that looks like. So making sure then too that you also have plans to accommodate that, and that like you say, where's the data and where's our data centers?
Yeah, that's great. In terms of that, natural disasters, wars and that, one of the businesses I was working with as a system engineer, we built some monitoring tools to watch earthquakes out in Japan. Extremely useful. You could tell when they had a big earthquake there because they were happening quite a bit. They got hit with the 7.0, brought down the data center out in Japan. So we had to watch that. And yeah, I built that tool. It was kind of fun to watch the 5.0s and the 4.0s come in with the aftershocks, and we were just watching it on a graph, and we put that up in the data center. But that was part of risk management because Japan was a really big market for the company we're working for.
And then being able to fail over, right? So
Yeah.
when you identify those, now we know there's a risk there. We have identified a solution to monitor that, but then what's that failover look like? And what's the solution to that? How do we transfer that traffic in near real time so that you're not down?
Yeah, and that was also a big challenge that we ran into is, where do you send that traffic? When Japan's down almost completely due to that, it's kind of, those are some fun challenges you got to deal with as an organization.
Yeah, and maybe we mentioned disaster recovery. I think Dr. McKee, you mentioned that earlier. And it's important also to practice those things so that when you do have that event where your data center has gone down or something's happened, that you know that process will actually work for you. Because it's a really bad feeling when you have something happen and then you go to that document and everyone felt great about it, and you go start working your way through it, and it doesn't work the way you thought it did. So definitely practice those things as well.
So Nathan, Brandon, it's been fun, but I think we're at time. So thank you, TechNet, for having us.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.